Mr. Speaker.
Stuart Nash.
Thank you much, Mr. Speaker. My colleague Grant Robinson said, get ready to jump up. It sounds like Colin's winding down, but he said that from about the first minute. And I sort of wondered, Colin, if you had any sort of interest in education, or this was just a speech you were given and said read it because you're 2 hours, due to the stuff up in the house, things are early. So a bit of passion in education. I mean, I think education is actually the most important thing we can do for our children and our communities. That's why I stand in support of the second reading, Mr. Speaker. It's hard to believe that the first reading for this bill was actually in August last year. August last year, too many important bills affecting the people of New Zealand have been rushed through under urgency since then. Goodness me, this is only the third week back and we're already rushing legislation through in what appears to be a slap-hazard way. I mean, I assume there must be some sort of plan or some sort of logic to the process, Mr. Speaker. But yeah, I know. Well, I certainly can't follow it, Mr. Hipkins. I don't know if you can. Can anyone follow this? I don't think so. But anyway, I don't think that this sort of lack of process or progress or is what the people of New Zealand voted for. There's a lot of stuff going on at the moment, Mr. Speaker, that I don't think the people of New Zealand voted for. This bill, by and large, is a technical bill. The last speaker said it didn't have much substance. Well, it has got quite a bit of substance, but it's a technical bill. It enshrines a couple of important philosophies that we as the Labour Party strongly value. It's one of the main reasons why I support this bill. The Labour Party has always seen the fostering of economic development of our Pacifica brothers and sisters as one of its major responsibilities and goals. This bill also builds on Labour's fantastic law of giving interest-free student loans to all students. And what a wonderful piece of legislation that was. It was, of course, as we all know, Labour legislation. Education has to be the cornerstone of economic development. And in my humble opinion, the interest-free student loan legislation is one of the greatest pieces of economic development legislation passed in a generation. It certainly passes the Nash test of, is it right for the people of New Zealand?
I thought that was Harry Holland.
And it does, Mr. Speaker. But talking of Harry Holland, Mr. Robinson, I had to smile last night when Mr. McIndoe in this House was putting words into the mouth of the great Harry Holland, one of the Labour Party's early great leaders. And no disrespect to the member from somewhere in Hamilton, but those who know their political history will also know that Mr. McIndoe has a few more years of sweating blood for the people of New Zealand before he can even start to speak on behalf of the great Harry Holland. Sir Roger Douglas will know that, won't you, Sir Roger? Harry Holland was a great man. But I digress. This bill makes some technical amendments, but by and large, does three things. First, it allows those from the nations of Niue, the Cook Islands and Tokelau and the Ross Dependency who have come to New Zealand to seek educational opportunities to return home in order to put their education and learning into practice. Secondly, it provides an incentive to those currently resident in the aforementioned countries to come to New Zealand and be educated, then return home to families, friends and jobs while achieving the same advantages as citizens domiciled already in New Zealand. And thirdly, it provides opportunities to New Zealand citizens who may wish to travel to Niue, Cook Islands, Tokelau or the Ross Dependency in order to pursue professional opportunities for any number of reasons. This bill also allows interest-free loans for students engaged in full-time study overseas under a formal exchange program approved by the New Zealand government or a formal agreement between the New Zealand education provider and an overseas tertiary education provider. And I think in this day and age of globalisation, that's a wonderful bit. So I commend the Minister of Revenue on that. But in my speech on the first reading of this bill, Mr. Speaker, I stated that I had a grave concern that the national government would look to repeal the interest-free student loan provisions, therefore necessitating me being back in this House within 2 years in order to repeal the amended legislation. Well, what do we have it? I suppose Mrs. Tolley was never going to do it. She had enough problems as it is, and loading the repeal of interest-free student loan scheme upon her already fragile shoulders probably would have just been too much. So Mr. Joyce was given the task. Are we surprised, colleagues? No. Absolutely not. I tell you what, as soon as we in the Labour caucus had heard that Mr. Joyce had been appointed Minister of Tertiary Education, we knew that this spelt trouble for current and aspiring students. In fact, it probably spells trouble for every student who's got a student loan and is not paying interest at the moment. But at least Mr. Joyce is honest. Well, he's honest on this. He said that supporting the student loan scheme when he was the campaign manager for the National Party, was a political call. Nice. No philosophy behind that, no idealism. It was a political call. So at least we now know what he believes in. Well, nothing. You know, Mr. Speaker, the irony about National's planned removal of the interest-free student loan scheme is the vast majority of members on that side who went through the education system, the tertiary education system, actually did it when it was free. And yet here they are taking away those opportunities for students who want to study now and better themselves. It's actually amazing. Now, but I do want to say that this bill, as it stands, is currently aspirational. With regards to this bill, the Minister of Revenue, Mr Dunn, has said, and I quote, "This is another positive step that will allow people to further their studies overseas in a way that will benefit New Zealand in the longer term." And I totally agree with the Minister. That's one of the reasons, as I said, why I'm supporting this bill. But with all due respect, I ask, what about those who live here and who want to stay in New Zealand and study in New Zealand? The National Government is about to steal the educational opportunities of thousands of New Zealanders, and that is simply not fair. It represents incorrect priorities. Let's see, where has the money been stolen from? Let's start with we're just talking about in education here, not elsewhere. There's $11 million that the Prime Minister and Minister English and every other National Maori Party and ACT MP has stolen from those who can least afford to get into education through the training incentive allowance. $11 million gone. So these are solo parents who make a proactive choice to engage in education whilst they're bringing up their children, have suddenly had their opportunities taken away. Gone. Let's cut them out. Unbelievable, unbelievable. Where are the priorities? That's dreadful, actually. Now, where else have we taken? Well, there's this healthy foods and schools guideline. The government has slashed, burned, cut and got rid of that. You've taken it away. My point is, there is no point because these guys have taken away the funding to those who require it most. Now, where else has the money been taken from, Mr. Speaker? From night classes, from high school night classes. Unbelievable. Adult and community education. And where has it gone to? Well, I can report that about $35 million has gone into private schools. I wonder if that's fair. $35 million stolen from the poor and given to the rich. Given to the rich. I didn't go to a private school, Mr. Quinn, because I believe in the state sector. I went to an incredibly good state school. An incredibly good state school. But this is Robin Hood in reverse. A modern-day New Zealand Sheriff of Nottingham. Or the Sheriff of nothing. And look what it did for you, goodness me. I wouldn't mention that school's name, Mr. Quinn, because I'll be embarrassed to have you as an alumni, there's no doubt about that. But anyway, what else are we going to do? We're going to raise GST to 15%. We're going to raise GST. That's going to help everyone, isn't it? Oh, I just can't understand the logic. So 11 million from the training incentive allowance, 13 million from community and adult education classes, 35 million to private schools. Yeah, that's about equality, isn't it? You know, the amazing thing... Oh, wow. Well, now, isn't that an interesting assertion? That member over there has said that state schools do not teach their children to read, but private schools do. That is a damning indictment on the teachers who teach in the state education sector. Imagine saying that. That is unbelievable. So the reason you send your children, the reason that member would send their children to a state school is because only the private sector teaches their children to read. The state sector doesn't. Well, I can inform that member that is not true at all. The state sector has some of the best teachers in this country, and it does an amazing job, Mr. Speaker. And I take that as a slight against every teacher who teaches in the state sector. Unbelievable. National has never had a mandate or a belief system, and that has just proven it. That is why those members can slash and burn and make those sorts of comments to such an extent without any conscience. I can tell this House that under the next Prime Minister, the Honourable Phil Goff, that the Labour Party will bring back principled spending around education, because we believe, as we always have believed, what the Labour Party stands for is that the people of New Zealand demand and require a sound education system that they had under Labour. That side of the House, Mr. Speaker, is taken